Hey everybody, Tom Stimulis with True North Group, and we are here today for our Tuesday Facebook Live. And today's topic is going to be bring your own device, or otherwise known as BYOD. And over the last several years, BYOD has really taken a hold in all types of organizations. It initially started as a cost savings measure for organizations where they no longer had to issue an additional phone. And if you've been in the industry or you've been working in industry for any amount of time, there was a time where you always had two phones. You had your personal phone and you had your business phone. And when you were out, you always carried two phones. I did it for years. And then eventually, through complaints of employees, HR felt that it was a good morale boosting, but then also from a management perspective, from a cost perspective, the organizations felt there was a lot of value in allowing employees to use their own devices. They were happier. It gave them some advantages for organizations that did it correctly. One of the big issues was that individuals were checking their Gmail accounts or their Yahoo accounts, or were accessing this type of these file sharing locations, and this kind of allowed companies to lock those sites down on the corporate side, so the desktops and the laptops, because now individuals could check their emails on their phones. But whenever there's always a balance between security and functionality. And if you have increased functionality, you have reduced security. If you have increased security, you have reduced functionality. That's just the way it always works. So what you try to do is you try to find a balance. And some of the challenges or the risks that I don't think were really reviewed by organizations, and now unfortunately they have to review them because there's been so much changes, is that the first thing is what do you do? What does your organization do? And would you be a potential for data theft? Could an employee steal information that they have access to on their phone? Or if they were to leave, would it be on there? How do you know what information is actually sitting on your employees' phones? How do you know what access these employees have with their phones? Is it just their email? I don't know, do they have access to file shares? Can they upload data? Can they download data? And another thing to keep in mind is if you don't own the assets, right, then how do you manage it? How do you know whether it's an Android or an iPhone? How do you know it's locked or unlocked? How do you know what type of malware is sitting on this phone? Android is more susceptible to viruses and malware than iPhones. Unlocked, both iPhones and Android are even more susceptible. And how do you know that there's not malware on these phones that could be transmitted to your network because you're giving them access to your network? There's legal issues that you have to look at. You spend a tremendous amount of time building up your reputation, and that reputation can take a significant hit because of a mishap by an employee, mishandling data, sending it to the wrong clients, divulging it publicly. There's a lot of different things. What are the controls? What happens if their device is stolen? How do you know that phone has a password on it, at least a minimum of a password, right? How do you know that phone data is encrypted? How do you know that the person who stole the phone doesn't just pick it up and can open it and see all of the data that the employee has, which is related to your company? Poor mobile management. That's a real problem there, which ties back to all of these things we talked about, is how is the company going to have positive control over the information on that device? Because it's not your device. right? So, and if you don't, and we've talked about this as well with training, it's important that if these employees don't have the proper training, they're not going to necessarily be as aware of the risks that could occur by having this information that they're accessing and then storing it on their specific devices. Now, the biggest thing that you have to decide is, all right, do my employees need to use their phones to access the data? Now, some organizations, you know what, they have a laptop that they carry around with them, that or they have a desk, or they have a job where they're only working from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. and after 5 o'clock, they don't have a requirement to answer emails or be reachable, all right, because that's just the nature of their job. Well, you have to assess, does that person need to use their phone? If the answer is no, then don't allow them to have access to the network if there's no need for it. So not everyone in your organization, and that's a problem that a lot of organizations do. They just make a blanket decision and they just give everyone BYOD capabilities. Not everyone needs BYOD capabilities. Now, if you're running a service industry where you have a lot of consultants and they're on the road and they have to be they have to be able to reach certain data, sales information, quoting tools, things like that, that's a completely different situation. But identify who really needs that access. And then how do you control that? And the first thing you have to do is you have to have a BYOD or teleworking policy, right? If it's not written down, it doesn't exist. And you cannot hold an employee accountable for a mistake if you have not identified what those mistakes are. I understand nobody likes to write policies because policies can be long, but you know what? Start with something simple. Let them know what's reasonable. What can they do? What can't they do? What should they do if the device is lost or stolen? How do they report that? What data are they allowed to keep on their device? Are they only allowed to check emails? Are they allowed to download attachments from those emails? Basically set it up with where you think the risks are. It could be 1 page. It could be 2 pages. It does not need to be a 15-page document. It could really be done with 1 or 2 pages, depending on the size of your organization, because you really want to touch the high things. Make sure people understand what they can and what they can't do. With that policy, you also want to put in there that all phones, all devices that access the network, and you would probably do this in a memorandum of agreement, all right, between you and your employee, that if they're going to have access to certain features, certain data, certain services within the company, that phone is subject to audit. Because as the owner of the data, you are affording them a courtesy, right? It's not a right, it's a privilege. If they don't want their phones to be audited for information, all right, because you're not going to be looking at their pictures or anything like that. You're really just looking to see if there is data on there that should or should not be on them. If they don't want to subject themselves to an audit, then they really don't want BYOD, okay? Because there needs to be a balance. It should not, all of the risk should not fall on the owner. There needs to be an agreement between the employee and the owner. Now, if you can afford it, right, then what you really want to do is you want to kind of get into what we call a mobile device management solution. And what that does is that's a software application that each employee would load onto their phone, and it builds a container. And that's where all of the data would be. That's where the email and that's where the files go. And it's in that container. And the beauty of that container is if your employee calls and says, hey, I lost my phone, you can set it up where that data will be wiped the next time that phone is turned on, regardless, or connected to a network or a cell network. It will wipe that data. If the employee leaves, you can wipe that container without wiping the employee's entire phone. So it really kind of gives you control. It also allows you what it will allow, whether you will allow a PDF to be downloaded or a Word doc or an Excel spreadsheet, or it will only be a viewable, where someone needs to see the document, but they can't download the document. Now, of course, they could download it on their laptop, all right, but really we're talking about their phone, because their laptop is going to most likely be yours. And you're going to own that laptop, and you're going to have much more control over the laptop. So I'm not saying, and in closing, I'm not saying don't use BYOD, because there are significant savings for growing companies. But, the one thing is, when it comes to responsibility, I'll use the term that you can delegate, but you can't abdicate. So just because you no longer want to handle or issue out company phones from a cost savings perspective, all right, and you want to delegate out that to the BYOD. So you want to allow your employees, because you think it's good for your culture, you think they'll be more productive, it'll save you money. You don't abdicate, you cannot abdicate the responsibility of that data. So if that data is lost, or if that data is stolen, or if there's a breach, if it's leaked, it falls on you as the owner of the organization, and not the employee. All right, because the employee's name is not going to be in the newspaper. It's going to be your company's name, and whether you're regulated or non-regulated. But if you're regulated, the regulator is going to go and talk to you, and you're going to be the one that potentially could be fined if regulated information is there. I don't want to give you all the gloom and doom, but we can't disregard that we have a responsibility to protect that data, whether we're allowing our employees to use their own personal devices, or whether we are giving them devices to perform those jobs. All right. So if you have any other additional questions, please put them in the comments. As always, if you want to set up a one-to-one, just help at SBDC Virginia.org, and then we can just set up a one-to-one. And lastly, I have a webinar on Thursday. Cybersecurity Awareness Month is in October, and I'm going to be doing a presentation on how you can get involved in Cybersecurity Awareness Month and become a cybersecurity champion, working, to really promote cybersecurity in your organization, in your community, and also advertise how you are doing what you can do to protect your clients' data. It's Thursday, 12 to 1. We're going to be going over some of these great resources that are available to everyone who wants to sign up as a cyber champion with the government this year. So if you can join, we'd love to have you. We're really trying to get as many companies in Virginia to participate in this program. And I'm looking forward to seeing everybody. And like I said, if you can join Thursday, we'd love to have you. Have a great day, and we will talk to you next week.